Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that the very fabric of identity can unravel when a secret child lurks in the shadows of a powerful dynasty, and for Dani Blackwood, the discovery that she has a son she never knew about becomes the ignition spark that threatens to consume everything she thought she understood about family, loyalty, and vengeance. For years, Dani had lived on the fringes of the Blackwood Empire, a restless spirit whose rebellious nature and mistrust of authority kept her at arm's length from the family's opulent gatherings and boardroom negotiations. She was the prodigal daughter who preferred the roar of motorcycle engines to the clink of champagne glasses, and her mercurial temper and free-spirited choices made her an outsider in her own bloodline. But nothing prepared her for the day when an unassuming envelope slipped under her door would shatter the comfortable narratives she had woven about her past and force her to confront a son she had no recollection of birthing and losing. It began on a humid summer morning when Dani, bleary-eyed from a late-night ride, stumbled across a weathered letter sealed in mustard-colored paper, its corners frayed, as though the winds of time had battered it relentlessly. The letter was penned in elegant, looping script that felt vaguely familiar. It was addressed simply to D. Blackwood. At first glance, she nearly tossed it aside, assuming it was some obscure business inquiry or fan letter. But something about the penmanship stirred an echo of memory deep within her chest, so she tore it open with a curiosity she hadn't felt since her teenage years. As she read the words, acknowledgments of youthful love, confessions of a brief, passionate affair, and the revelation that she had given birth to a child more than 20 years ago, a wave of disbelief crashed over her. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she read that she had left that newborn at a shelter, convinced she could never provide the stability or security necessary for a child in a world where her own mother, Helena Blackwood, had never offered unconditional love. The letter writer, whose name she recognized as Marcus Traverse, an old flame she had thought lost to time, spoke of nights spent dreaming of her, years of regret, and a hope that she would someday know the truth. But what transfixed Dani was the closing line: "He's alive, Dani, and he's been close to you. More than you could ever imagine." For a moment, Dani's rebellious exterior faltered as a torrent of emotions spilled through her veins: guilt, fear, and a pang of longing for a past she had buried beneath adrenaline-fueled escapades. All those years ago, she had been so sure she could never be a mother that the Blackwood legacy, with its suffocating expectations and stifling grandeur, would consume any child who bore its name. So when she discovered she was pregnant at 18, she ran, abandoning the family estate at midnight, hitchhiking north to the modest warmth of a halfway house where she delivered her son before relinquishing him to the state. She remembered little of those months, only the ache of loneliness and the terror of never measuring up to the opulent lives her cousins led. She had assumed her secret died with her fleeting romance, but Marcus's letter suggested otherwise. Not only had her choice reverberated through the years, but her son had survived and grown, somehow finding his way back to the very doorstep of the Blackwood Empire. Fueled by a mixture of dread and desperate curiosity, Dani spent the next days peeling back the layers of her memory and searching for any hint of what Marcus's words meant. She visited the rundown shelter where she had delivered her sewn-in aging brick building at the edge of town, its paint peeling and windows clouded with dust. The administrator recalled a shy young woman who had arrived in tears, clutching a single photograph of Dani's child swaddled in a tattered blanket. The administrator's gaze grew distant as she retrieved the Archivia ledger of children surrendered and matched with prospective families. Dani's heart pounded as she flipped through pages, halting at the entry for infant male, born November 12, 2002. The listing indicated a temporary placement with a foster family named Foster Martin, followed by adoption by the Whitaker family in the neighboring county. The Whitakers had moved to the city many years ago, and any trace of correspondence after the initial adoption had vanished. The only clue that suggested her son might be alive was a notation: subject may request reunification once age 21. Dani closed her eyes, the world tilting. Her son, now 22, could very well be standing in the same corridors where her mother presided, or sitting behind a desk in one of the offices she barely herself frequented. The thought both terrified and haunted her. Still reeling, Dani returned to the Blackwood mansion, a sprawling neo-Gothic estate perched on a hill overlooking the city lights. The Blackwood family's influence had been woven into the city's foundations for generations. Their construction empire, their philanthropic endowments, and their iron-fisted control of the local media all cemented their status as untouchable. Dani had grown up shunning the suffocating grandeur of her family's wealth, but now the mansion felt like the epicenter of a storm she could no longer outrun. She prowled the halls, memories of her childhood jaunts lingering like ghosts, afternoons spent racing her cousins through hidden hallways, nights banished to the attic for protesting at boardroom dinners. Yet never had she imagined a child born from her blood would be close enough to the Blackwood circle to strike out at its heart. Haunted by the possibility that her son was now working somewhere in the family's vast network, perhaps as an assistant in Helena's office, a manager at one of the Blackwood properties, or even the family chauffeur whose identity was shrugged off as unremarkable, Dani resolved to investigate covertly. She adopted the guise of a guest visiting for an upcoming gala, using her familial connection to move through rooms she had once vowed never to enter again. She prowled the corridors like a predator, her senses attuned to the slightest hint of familiarity, a face that bore the ghost of her own, a stance that hinted at inherited pride or resentment. She asked subtle questions of the staff at events, planting seeds of casual conversation. "Who's that new assistant in my father's office? He always seems to be there, hovering near the edge of conversations." Yet the staff, cowed by the Blackwood reputation, spoke only in guarded whispers. Rumors swirled of a quiet young man named Gabriel, tall, dark-haired, coolly efficient, who had been hired under a false identity to oversee logistical details for Helena's political lobbying efforts. Some said he never asked questions, others that his gaze carried a simmering intensity that unsettled those who crossed him. Although Dani had never formally met Gabriel, she felt a magnetic pull, as though threads of fate were drawing her toward him. Determined to learn more, Dani struck up an unplanned encounter at the company's subterranean parking garage, where she caught sight of Gabriel in his crisp chauffeur uniform, helping a visiting executive with bags. As he straightened and turned to leave, their eyes met for a brief flicker, his expression polite but unreadable. A jolt coursed through her veins. There was something in the set of his jaw, the angle of his cheekbones, that spoke of shared lineage. Yet she forced herself to suppress hope-laced impulses. Instead, she slipped a discarded business card near his car's door, hand-Leah challenge encoded with veiled words. "Gabriel, I know who you are. Meet me tonight at the old boathouse." The card would set in motion a clandestine meeting that neither could fully anticipate. Night descended over the sprawling grounds as Dani slipped out through the servants' entrance and made her way to the abandoned boathouse by the lake. Moonlight danced across the water, casting pale reflections on the rickety wooden dock that led to the structure, its windows boarded and doors hanging by fractured hinges. She waited in the shadows, heart hammering against her ribs, until the soft echo of footsteps alerted her to Gabriel's arrival. He appeared, wearing an overcoat over his chauffeur's uniform, his face etched with guarded caution. His eyes, dark and penetrating, held a flicker of recognition as he approached, but he said nothing until she spoke first. "You're Gabriel," she said, voice quivering with restrained emotion. "I'm Dani Blackwood." "My son. You're my son." She had rehearsed the words in her mind 1,000 times, but as they spilled across the night air, they felt fragile, like a thread that might snap under pressure. Gabriel's expression flickered first with disbelief, then a simmering rage that hardened his gaze. "My name isn't really Gabriel," he replied, voice low and clipped. "It's Jonathan Whitaker. And I've known who you were for years." Dani's heart lurching at the revelation that he had hidden both his identity and his intentions. Jonathan, she whispered, swallowing the lump in her throat. I'm sorry. I never meant to abandon you. I thought I was saving you from a life of Blackwood privilege, imagining you'd hate the same opulence I rejected. He crossed his arms, stepping out of the shadows into the soft glow of moonlight. You abandoned me, Dani. That's the truth. I grew up reading about the Blackwoodseer family, thinking you were dead or worse. When I was old enough, I tracked the family's holdings, figured out your connections, and assumed this identity to infiltrate the dynasty. I wanted answers, wanted to see the people who gave up on me without a second thought. Dani's throat tightened as she reached out, but he recoiled. You've been working for my mother, my grandparents, the people who never wanted me to know I existed, he spat. Every move I made was to get closer, to learn how I could hurt you all for what you took from me. She felt tears sting her eyes, but she squared her shoulders. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said. But please believe me when I say I never meant to cast you aside. I was young, scared, and convinced you would be better off away from everything I represented. Jonathan's jaw clenched as he glared across at her. Better off, he echoed bitterly. I watched you living a life of ease while I went to institutions, wondering if you were even alive. Meanwhile, my trash of a foster father beat me for asking questions. I survived because I learned to hate you as a shield. The tension crackled between them, each word a spark that could ignite a conflagration. Suddenly, Jonathan's posture shifted from rage to guarded calculation. There's someone else behind this, he murmured, stepping closer, as though hesitant to reveal his next revelation. Someone paying me to stay close to the family, to report back every detail, someone who wants to see the Blackwoods brought down. Dani's breath hitched. Who? She demanded, voice taut with fear and frustration. Jonathan glanced over his shoulder toward the mansion's silhouette looming in the distance. I can't be certain, he said. But the payments come from an anonymous offshore account, and contacts seem linked to a rival construction firm, someone who's been undercut by the Blackwoods for years. But there are whispers that a member of the Blackwood lineage itself may have orchestrated this. Someone intent on claiming the inheritance by twisting you and me into weapons against each other. The revelation hit Dani like a physical blow. A family member, someone she had once trusted, perhaps an uncle, a cousin, pulling the strings from within, manipulating her lost son to sabotage the dynasty. The implications were staggering. As they spoke, Dani's mind raced. Her mother, Helena, had always seemed impervious, her smile a mask that hid ambition sharpened by decades of social maneuvering. Could Helena truly be behind this? Or perhaps it was someone younger, a cousin who saw Dani's rebelliousness as a stain on the family name and wanted a Blackwood dynasty cleansed of unapproved branches. Whoever it was, their machinations had ensnared both Dani and Jonathan, forcing them into roles neither had chosen, mother and son destined by blood yet torn apart by deceit. Dani felt her resolve crystallize. She could no longer equivocate between protecting the family that had shunned her and embracing the son she had abandoned. She had a choice: shield her family's legacy at the cost of condemning her own flesh and blood, or stand beside her son and rip apart the Blackwood dynasty in the process. I won't let them use you anymore, she said, her voice steely. No matter who's behind it. Jonathan's expression flickered between skepticism and a haunted hope. Why should I trust you? He asked, stepping back. Because I'm your mother, she replied, tears pricking at her eyes. I've made mistakes, horrible mistakes. But I won't make this one. I'll stand with you, find out who's behind this, and make them pay for what they've done. Jonathan exhaled slowly, warily lowering his guard. If we do this, he said, we go all in. We expose whoever set me on this path, even if it means destroying our family name. Dani nodded, placing a tentative hand on his shoulder. I'm ready, she whispered, her heart pounding. Let's end this. As they turned toward the dark silhouette of the mansion, both parent and child understood the stakes. Love and betrayal had always danced in the shadows of the Blackwood estate, but now their own bloodline had been weaponized. To reclaim their identities, they would have to wage war on the family's hidden sins and reveal the traitor lurking among them. In the days that followed, Dani and Jonathan, no longer disguised as Gabriel's mechanical efficiency, began their covert investigation. By day, Jonathan maintained his role as chauffeur, gathering whispers from overheard boardroom conversations and gleaned emails he accessed during late-night maintenance of Helena's study computer. His intimate knowledge of schedules allowed him to plant listening devices in strategic locations, capturing cryptic instructions delivered to household staff. Meanwhile, Dani leveraged her status as a Blackwood to attend high-level meetings under the pretense of reconciling with the family, extracting information from relatives she once scorned. At each social event, boardroom luncheons, gala fundraisers, and exclusive charity auctions, Dani wore a mask of faux contrition, flirting with relatives and probing for signs of duplicity. Whenever someone mentioned a sudden infusion of campaign funds for Helena's political aspirations, funds mysteriously traced to accounts in offshore tax havens, Dani's suspicions deepened. Underneath polite smiles and the clink of crystal glasses, she could feel the currents of betrayal swirling around her, each ripple pointing to a puppeteer whose identity grew clearer with every clue. At last, their investigation coalesced around a single figure, Douglas Blackwood, Helena's cousin and business partner, whose outward charm masked an insatiable thirst for power. A master strategist, Douglas had long envied Helena's position as the family matriarch in training, thirsty to be the true heir to the Blackwood throne. Unbeknownst to all but a select few, Douglas's construction firm had teetered on bankruptcy after losing a major contract to Helena's philanthropic development board. Desperate to regain influence, he cultivated a secret alliance with a rival corporate conglomerate, funneling funds to sabotage the Blackwood brand from within. When Jonathan, working late in the mansion's garage, overheard Douglas's terse phone call praising an anonymous asset for getting close to the family's weak link and referencing Dani's reckless child, Dani knew they had their culprit. The realization stung. Douglas had orchestrated Jonathan's infiltration, using him as a blade pointed at both Helena and the wider family, hoping that chaos would solidify his claim to the empire. Yet, by enlisting Dani's own son, Douglas had miscalculated the bond that blood would forge when tested. Armed with this knowledge, Dani and Jonathan devised a plan to expose Douglas's treachery. They arranged a private meeting in Helena's oak-paneled library, bidding farewell to subterfuge so they could confront their family directly. As Douglas entered, his confident smile faltered when he saw Dani and Jonathan standing side by side, their eyes flashing with determination. Helena lingered in the doorway, her gaze sharpened by maternal concern mingled with suspicion. "What is this?" Helena demanded, her voice cool. "Dani, you said you wanted reconciliation." Dani met her mother's gaze unflinchingly. "I do," she said. "But first, I need to unmask a traitor." She turned to Douglas. "You thought you could destroy us from within, Douglas. You paid Jonathan to infiltrate our lives, to sow discord and gather secrets for your profit. But you failed to anticipate one thing: blood is thicker than deceit." Jonathan stepped forward, tossing a file onto the mahogany desk. It contained transcripts of Douglas's phone calls, bank records showing offshore payments, and incriminating emails linking him to the rival conglomerate. Douglas's eyes widened as he recognized the evidence. "You can't prove," he sputtered, but the files lay bare his duplicity. Helena's color drained as she flipped through the pages, breath catching in her throat. "Douglas," she whispered, voice breaking. "The betrayal cut deeper than any business defeat. All these years, I trusted you as family." Douglas, his facade crumbling, took a step back. "Family," he scoffed. "Family is a weakness. I did what I had to do to protect the legacy." Helena's eyes blazed with fury. "Protect? You're the one who twisted our legacy into a weapon for your own greed." She turned to Dani, her face softening. "Dani, I'm sorry. I never knew Douglas intended this." Dani nodded, though her heart weighed heavy, Reconciliation would come later. "We need to decide how to move forward," she said, voice steady. "Jonathan's future hangs in the balance." Helena's gaze drifted to her grandson, her voice caught between pride and regret. "Jonathan, you're part of this family, whether by blood or by right," she said, stepping closer. "You've been manipulated by Douglas. Owe you an apology." Jonathan, his posture still tense, regarded his grandmother warily. "I don't know if I can trust you," he said, voice low. "You watched me work for you, hurt me in silence." Helena reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed his cheek. "We were blind. But I want to make this right." The moment trembled on the edge of forgiveness and distrust as Jonathan weighed the sincerity in his grandmother's eyes. At length, he exhaled, his stance softening. "Expose Douglas publicly. Let the world see his betrayal." Helena nodded, and with Dani at her side, they escorted Douglas out of the library, ensuring he would face the legal consequences of his treachery. The shattered calm of the Blackwood estate began to stitch itself back together as Helena assumed temporary leadership, restoring order while Dani and Jonathan worked to heal the wounds Douglas had inflicted. Though the scandal had cast a harsh spotlight on their family, it also offered an unexpected gift, a chance for Dani and Jonathan to build a bond untainted by half-truths and abandoned promises. Helen, humbled by the events, embraced Dani's rebellious spirit as an asset rather than a liability, recognizing that the same fire that drove Dani to reject the family's constraints could now be harnessed to guide the dynasty through its darkest hour. In the weeks that followed, the Blackwood enterprise shifted from the brink of implosion toward a new era of transparency and inclusion. Jonathan, stepping out from behind the false identity of Gabriel, was formally acknowledged as a Blackwood heir, given a role on the family's philanthropic council, and enrolled in a mentorship program to prepare him for leadership. Though the road ahead would be paved with challenges rebuilding trust, forging cohesion among warily observant board members, and laying to rest the ghosts of past betrayals, Dani felt a sense of hope bloom within her. She had confronted her own mistakes, reclaimed her son, and forced her family to confront the rot at its core. Instead of viewing her rebelliousness as a stain, the Blackwoods began to see it as the instrument of their survival, a reminder that blood ties could be both chains and anchors, binding us to our past yet guiding us toward a more honest future. On the quiet mornings that followed, as Dani and Jonathan rode out on the mansion's winding driveway, her on her beloved motorcycle, him on a borrowed kid's bicycle, she realized that beyond the gates of wealth and privilege, the true legacy of the Blackwood dynasty would no longer be built on secrecy or power plays, but on the unbreakable bonds forged when mother and son chose each other over betrayal. In the gentle hum of engines and the soft rustle of autumn leaves, Dani felt the full weight of what she had reclaimed, not just her son, but her own place in a family that had once cast her aside. And as she glanced back at Jonathan's determined grin, she knew that together, they would chart a new path, one where the children born in shadows would no longer be lost, but would stand proudly in the light of their own choosing.